A little while ago, it was revealed on Twitter which elemental powers come from which source dragons, and this revelation comes with a lot of implications that I will discuss in this video. So first of all, what elemental powers come from which dragons? Motion created the elements of fire, speed, sound, quake, and shockwave. Flow created water, time, wind, smoke, and form. Energy created lightning, heat, light, and propulsion. Strength created earth, metal, gravity, bubbles, and fusion. Focus created ice, mind, reflex, figment, and tech. Life created green, plants, poison, size, and nature. But this also confirms a couple things. For example, there were a couple powers that we didn't know if they were the same power or if they were new powers. And now we know. And I have a couple of problems with a couple of these. First of all, I already talked in previous videos about how I really don't like how Dragon's Rising went out of its way to emphasize that we can't have two elemental masters of the same element, just for them to then show a bunch of powers that are identical to other powers. So now we have confirmation that nature and plants are two different elements, which fortunately means that Bolobo is still alive, but also they're exactly the same power. If there is a difference between these two powers, then they didn't show us that. The power of plants is the ability to control plants, and all we saw Bolobo do was control plants. So then again, what's the difference besides the name? Then this other one, which I expressed how much I disliked it from the very beginning, reflex and speed are exactly the same power. There's no difference. And now we're told that they come from different source dragons. Speed comes from motion and reflex comes from focus, which makes sense. But they're the exact same power. Again, I don't have a problem with similar elemental powers. The problem here is that they are identical. We were not shown any difference between speed and reflex or nature and plants. So again, why go through so much trouble to emphasize that there can't be two masters of the same element and then show two people with the same power? Now, the other very interesting thing that this list confirms is that we know that the source dragon of balance is dead, but now we know which elements belong to that dragon. And I think it's very interesting because now we know that balance, amber, and shadow belong to the source dragon of balance, which also confirms that shade and shadow are the same power, and it could mean that shade might be dead. But it also tells us something very interesting, and it's that even though the source dragon of balance is dead, the people who got their powers from that dragon didn't lose their powers. We didn't see Skylar, but we have seen the elemental masters of shadow and balance, and they still have their powers, and they seem rather unaffected by the death of the source dragon of balance. All this time, I was under the assumption that creation, destruction, and golden power all came from the source dragon of balance, and that his death had something to do with Wu and Garmadon's disappearance. I thought that was the reason why we haven't seen them, and why Wu is a ghost, but I was wrong. So I have no idea what happened to Wu, or what is going to happen to him next. I also thought that the source dragon of energy being captured by Imperium had something to do with Jay's memory loss, but now we have confirmation that heat, light, and propulsion all belong to this source dragon, and those elemental masters seem completely unaffected. It seems like whatever happens to the source dragon doesn't affect the elemental masters as much as I thought they would. This also makes way for a certain theory about how the source dragon of strength could be Rasa's master. At first I didn't know how this was possible, because that would mean that they will eventually have to defeat him. And I thought that once they did, all the elemental masters whose powers come from that source dragon would lose their powers. But now that we have seen that whatever happens to the source dragons doesn't really affect the elemental masters, I think it could very well be possible. Even if they end up having to defeat or imprison the source dragon of strength, it seems that that wouldn't affect the elemental masters as much as I thought it would. So we'll just have to wait and see what surprises Dragon's Rising has in store for us. And judging by what has been leaked, it seems that it's going to be something really special.